like getting in an ice bath, I think. I don't even really do an ice bath yet, but like you could stand there looking at it, be like, should I get in? Should I not get in? At a certain point, you just have to start dipping one toe in, right?
Oh no, we were at the pool up in Buffalo, and you just run and jump off the diving board right into the cold pool. So.
Well, that's what I mean, though. But this thing makes it slow because you have to hit that button, and it takes like 5 seconds, and then it does the 1, 2, 3. So it's sort of like even if you wanted to jump in the pool, a net catches you halfway and then lowers you in slow motion. So it's out of our control.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm very glad this worked out. We're glad your internet worked out. Joe, she said they got Starlink, so I'm super jealous. I was telling her I'm right next to Atlanta, and they won't even give it to us yet because we're too fancy, I guess. They're trying to help you folks out first. But
yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyway, folks, we have Emily Kitching of the infamous Eclectic Horseman Magazine joining us. And she's joining us from, I already forgot where you're at.
Elbert.
I know you're in Colorado.
Elbert, Colorado.
Elbert, Colorado. And we're super glad to have you on here. She had to battle the storms and the weather to make it happen. But we got you on. So anyway, Emily, we were already chatting a little bit, and feel like we already kind of got into some of the podcasts just sitting around in the green room. But I'm really interested right off the bat, just a little bit about when did you first have the idea to make a horse magazine? Because I don't know like how long you've been doing it. I know I read them when they come in, but it seems like a real labor of love. It's really cool. It's quite a magazine. A lot of great pictures, a lot of great gear ads in there even. I think I've bought stuff from people just because I saw it in there. And it's a great magazine. So when did you first come up with that idea?
Well, it's kind of a long story. So I've been doing Eclectic Horseman since 2001. So this is our 22nd year of publishing. And before that, I worked for another horsemanship magazine I was the editor there for 4 years. And then before that, through high school and college, I wrote freelance for that magazine. So, I mean, I've pretty much been doing this since I was, about 18. And it is a labor of love. But I feel like even if I won the lottery, I would still want to do. I mean, I know people say that, but I really would still do what I do because I do love it. So it's, I don't know. I started started this magazine. I don't know if I want to get into this, but, I had worked at the other publication, and it was a niche magazine that was focused on natural horsemanship, and it had gotten very successful. And the publisher, who was a team roper and had some other publications as well, he didn't have the same connection to horsemanship that I had, and he informed me that we were going to go to an advertising model instead of a subscriber-based model. And I was told that if somebody bought an ad, I would have to do stories with them. And being 26 and not really liking to be bossed around all that much, I was really mad about that. I mean, now I'm 48 and I would maybe have a little bit different perspective, but at that time I was down riding, and they were sitting around the kitchen table visiting, and was down at Mindy Bowers, and she had some folks there from out of town, and one of them was a New York Times editor, and I was sort of complaining, and he was like, well, why don't you start your own magazine and call it Eclectic Horseman? So he's the one that named the magazine. I didn't come up with that, and it maybe wasn't the best marketing choice to name something that you have to teach people how to spell all the time. But But we figured if people aren't willing to learn a new word, then probably Eclectic Horseman isn't for them. So it's we haven't looked back. So
Wow. Well,
yeah.
it actually kind of caught my eye because little sneak peek at my intelligence level. When I first noticed the magazine, I thought it said the Electric Horseman, and I thought that was a nod to the old Robert Redford movie. I was like, that's a cool magazine. And then it wasn't until
you're
I
not
read
alone.
a few of them, that I saw it said Eclectic Horseman.
Yeah, you're not alone, and the bank does cash checks written to Electric Horseman, so that happens pretty regularly.
I don't know. I mean, you just piled me in with a couple of bankers. I'm not sure that I feel any better, but I won't hold that against you.
Okay.
I'm going to keep trying to get smarter. But that is fascinating. Yeah, because we were talking before we got on here. I think the fact that you do that magazine and just hearing a little bit about how that came about, it makes me think of like how Joe and I wanted to do this and talk to people. Not that it's the same thing or that we're nearly as successful as you've been, but we hope to be. But just it's something that is, I guess kind of a labor of love, and you don't really know where it's going in the very beginning, but you feel very strongly that you should do it. And
Well, and like when we started, I quit my job at the other magazine and wrote a business plan and sort of followed that traditional model. It was sort of during that time of like startups and getting investment and things like that. So we explored that path, and we secured a pretty good amount of funding, but it wasn't enough to sort of launch at the level of where people had salaries and where it was sort of a like real business. But at that time, one of my friends was dying of cancer, and she, when she passed, she left us $10,000. And so we didn't secure enough funding to be able to keep the other investment. We had to give that back. But because Jody had passed away, that's what we started Eclectic Horseman with, was her investment. And like, I didn't take a salary for the first 2 years. I cleaned stalls for $10 an hour. So if it's something that you want to do, then yeah, you'll find a way to make it work.
So when you say we, how many people were involved at the start?
At the very start, it was me, and I had a friend that was sort of acted as my business advisor. She was more skilled in like the accounting. So she was sort of helped me in that startup phase. And my husband, Steve, he had a full-time job working at a tech startup. But he was involved. He's a graphic designer and does website development. And I had another friend who sort of volunteered to help me with some marketing. So the hope was that it would, again, start at sort of that full level of investment. Everybody could have a job and a paycheck. And then when we had to modify, we sort of adjusted to fit the situation.
That makes sense. Well, that's pretty slick and pretty helpful. You had some people close by that had relative skills, because I noticed that just being someone who runs my own business, riding horses for the public, and even doing this podcast. I mean, like the folks we have doing the limited graphic stuff we need. Like I had a friend from college who could make our logo and things like that. You don't realize like how helpful those little relationships are when you're trying to get something like that going.
Yeah. It's hard to do everything yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
So what year was it that the first episode, the first issue was printed?
September of 2001. So it was sort of a rough time to be launching a brand new business.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
So in light of that, I mean, that's kind of I know you had the internet then, but it's definitely before like this style and version of the internet and marketing. How did you market your magazine?
We had donated mailing lists from a lot of the clinicians that I worked with. And so they gave us their lists and we sent out direct mail. That was really that was sort of the standard at that time, was sending out direct mail pieces.
Wow.
These clinicians that you worked with, were they from like the other company, or just like you had gone to their clinics as a civilian, I guess, or how did those relationships work?
I definitely had built those relationships. I mean, like I rode in one of Buck's clinics when I was 13 or 14. So, like I had started a cult with him when I was really young, and had gone to a whole bunch of clinics. So that was part of when I worked at Trail Less Traveled. I mean, I had gone to Ray Hunt clinics, gone to Buck's clinics. Like I was very, very passionate about the horsemanship before I even started working there. And then, I developed those relationships, and a lot of those guys, like the first time I tried to interview Brian, he did not want to do an article. He was like, I've been in magazines, I've been misquoted, I have no interest. And I was like, okay, well, what if I let you read it first and you can double check my work? And, the other folks in the magazine were like, you can't do that. That's not how journalism works. And I'm like, but if I don't do this, I'm not going to get the article. So I've always tried to adjust to do what I need to do to help the sources be comfortable and develop that relationship. And thankfully I did, because, 30 years later, and I still am able to call Brian up and say, hey, let's do an article. And now he's happy to do that.
Well, if you own the magazine,
yeah,
you make the rules, right?
right.
Yeah. I feel like we've run, I don't know that there's like standard podcast etiquette, but there were definitely some things that maybe Ben and I had preconceived notions about. And then it was like, well, I mean, we're running this deal, so we'll just kind of do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just drawing from our personal deal. I'm not trying to compare us to you so much, but I think it's very empowering if you ever get in that type of situation where you can kind of redefine how the rules of engagement work, I guess you could say.
Totally. Because if the goal is to share stories, to share content, I mean, that's whatever you need to do to be able to make that work is worth doing.
So early
Absolutely.
on, outside of doing journalism in the horsemanship world, what other kind of journalism had you done?
Well, not so. So in high school, I worked on the high school newspaper, and I wrote the horoscopes. So that was about the extent of that. And then I went to CU Boulder, and I didn't really have a clue of what I wanted to do. I was riding horses for people, like mostly like horses that had gone home from training and just needed to be ridden during the week. So I was still riding, didn't really know what I wanted to study. I thought I like to write. I applied to the J school, which I didn't really realize was sort of hard to get in, but I got in. And then as I was working through the program, the last year you have to do like an internship. And I was already working at the Trail Less Traveled. I worked there full time, like my last year. And so the school sent me to do a internship at the Daily Camera, which was the local paper. And I'm like writing articles on bagel stores opening. And I'm like, I do not want to do this. This is not what I want to do with my life. And so I actually talked to my advisor, and he fought for me to be able to use the job that I was getting paid to do as my internship. And he's like, look, she's already doing what she wants to do. Let's make this work. And so I was very thankful that I didn't have to write any more bagel articles. So really horsemanship journalism has been all that I've done. really, besides horoscopes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was just thinking about, like you were talking about interviewing Brian. I don't know. So, like, for instance, from a podcasting standpoint, it's not always easy to find guests. But once we've solicited enough text messages and emails and we find these people, when they finally get on the podcast, they're very willing. So it's not that hard. But when you watch like TV journalists, they're like running up there and shoving a microphone in front of someone's face. It just seems like a very kind of disturbing way to get information from somebody. And then I can imagine like people that write pieces in newspapers and magazines, they've got to track their people down and get that interview. So maybe that's a little more cohesive environment. But I didn't know if you had worked outside of interviewing horsemen, just because I think for sure, and to their credit, a lot of these great horsemen are a little harder to, well, they're not necessarily hard to track down. They're a little bit harder to get them to agree to do an interview, for that matter, that they want to make sure that they're not misquoted or misunderstood, or you're going to take what they said and bend it out of contortion, or maybe even that you're going to get on there with them and just use it as a self-promoting platform and talk the whole time and then put their name on the head of the interview. So I just didn't know what if it compared to other work you had done, if it was different trying to interview horsemen. But that's is there anybody that, like, what do you have any interviews that really stand out that you were happy to get early on that were kind of tough people to track down and get their story? Or I don't know if you're getting their story or you're just getting them to write articles on certain things.
Yeah, it's more, I mean, I think I've always felt like the pool, especially at the start, the pool that I could draw from, that I felt confident in sharing their information as like credible and of value, that pool is pretty small. And so I was always very aware from the beginning that I really wanted to work on building like relationships. It's not like I'm just going to get one story and then move on to the next flavor of the month. There's just not enough people to then be, doing this for 22 years, 23 years. So I think I was always very mindful of that. And I mean, like that, the one with Brian Newbert was very memorable because that was like I started as the editor at the Trail in the fall of '97, and then I drove out in the little company Honda Civic to a clinic in Carson City, Nevada, and he was like, well, that's fine, you can come take pictures, but like I don't really want to do an article. And I'm like, okay, well, I just drove a really far distance, but we worked it out. And so, but that was right at the beginning. A funny story more recently was, well, not that recent, but Tom Curtin, the first time I ever met him was at the Ray Hunt benefit clinic, or Ray Hunt Appreciation Clinic down in Fort Worth. And I had never met him, but a lot of our readers were like, you've got to go check this guy out. But he was mostly on the East Coast, and I don't have a huge travel budget, but he was going to be there. So I just like walked up to him and I was like, hey, I'm Emily Kitching with Eclectic Horseman, and I'd like to do some how-to articles with you. And he just goes, I don't do how-to articles, and walked away. And I was like, okay, well, that went really well. So I was just like, okay, I let that alone for a while. And then I think it was like in 2017, maybe, I had some readers be like, you gotta go check him out. Like he's really got a lot to offer. So I went up to the colt starting camp that he does in Buffalo, and just went and observed and took a ton of pictures. And then I got home and I'm looking through the pictures, and I said, well, I called him up. I said, I know you don't do how-to articles, but what would you think about like looking at the photos and talking about what you see in each photo? And he was like, that's a great idea. So I found a new way to get information out there that he was comfortable with, and which I feel has been some of the best like journalistic work that I've done. And I've gotten incredible feedback on that modality. And I never would have done it. It never would have happened if I hadn't have been like, okay, I'll try it again. We'll try a different approach.
So have you approached that same sort of that sort of way, that sort of platform with any other people too? Of the pictures?
Not yet. I mean, sort of like, I would say different styles have worked with different folks. Like with Buck, it works really well to go to his clinics and take pictures, and I record the audio and transcribe it. Because he does such an excellent job narrating what he's doing in the moment, and I can get a really clear perspective on what he's doing as he's teaching it. And then I send it to him and have him take a look. If there's anything he wants to change, he can change it. But I feel like I try and find a way that works the best with each of the sources that fits their teaching style and how much time they want to put into it.
That makes sense.
So this gets into something that really interests me about Eclectic Horseman, because like you said, your pool is not very big, right? So, and I think that's wise, because you are in a way kind of protecting your brand, right? You want to have something that if someone's writing something in an Eclectic Horseman, like you said, it's not because they bought an advertisement. It's not because necessarily like as much of a business thing as it is there's something of value there. That, at least me, not being super familiar with the magazine, but from what I've read, that's kind of the brand, right? Is the quality, and as opposed to maybe something that has a little more, I don't know if production is the right word, but you're not Western Horseman or something like that.
No, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is totally good. You need both, right?
Yeah.
You need all kinds of magazines.
And I wish there were more, honestly. I mean, the magazine is an endangered species. And like I was visiting with one of my freelancers, and she's in her 70s, and she's like, yeah, I used to write for 25 different magazines, and they just don't exist anymore. I think there's a wonderful part about the internet and the access to all information all the time. But then things like magazines have gone away because you can't compete with something that's free, whether or not it's of the same value. That's not that there's not incredible stuff out there that you can get access to now, which is fantastic. I mean, people all around the world can do things like this and share information, which is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. But did you find, as the magazine grew, I guess my question is, how did you go about navigating that? Because that is, in a way, quite a large responsibility to, if you see someone new, say you have your original pool of however many people, and you see someone new, like that's quite a decision for you, for the magazine, for the brand and everything, to reach out to them and try to bring them in, because you're making a decision that could either help or hurt your brand. So, I'm sure now, as much tenure as you have, you have more practice making those decisions. But in the beginning, how did you approach that? Because, or maybe were you just in your 20s and you were like, let's just do it?
No, I mean, I think I would say I had to make peace with making mistakes. Like, I had to know that I wasn't always going to make the exact right decision. And some of the folks that, like, I might have maybe didn't feel great about, but hey, everybody else thinks they're, like, I could be swayed a little more by that pressure, and I wouldn't always listen to that, my gut feeling. And I would say, and then it eventually it was like, yeah, I probably should have listened to that gut feeling. But I also, I mean, I'm not, getting insulin to people who are dying. Like I have to keep a perspective of like, if I make a mistake, I can't just beat myself up endlessly. I have to just move on and try and make a better decision the next time. But the horses are the ones that really guide my judgment. So when I see somebody teach, when I watch them ride, I'm looking at what their horse has to say about it, because they're the ones that get to say, hey, this person really is knows what they're talking about, and I'm happy and content doing my job because they're a good leader, and that's what I look at first.
Yeah, well said. I think that is really important. I know in the beginning, Ben and I, we've been doing this just over a year. So in the whole spectrum of things, just absolutely babies as far as like the media we're putting out. But those first maybe 3 months, it was just like, it felt like a lot of bumps and bruises, where it was just like, oh, we shouldn't do that anymore. Or, I wish I could have had that question back, or, however you do it. And yeah, having that perspective that, now multiple decades of publications, those are little blips in the road, as opposed to maybe if you've only been going a handful of years, it's like, oh, that's going to end the publication right there. And that's at least how it felt for On the Move. It was like you could have one slip up, or one time you didn't bring your A game, and you're like, well, that's it. I don't even know what we try anymore. And obviously you kind of over dramatize that in your brain because of how much you care. But I think that's really important, a really important perspective to have, because I'm very guilty of not having that perspective. So I know how bad things can be if you let every little mistake get to you when you're trying to build something.
Well, I still remember like when I worked at Trail Less Traveled, I mean, I was like 22, sending my very first issue to press, and I could not get it out the door. Like I'm sitting there reading it over and over and over. And Ty Wyant was the managing editor there, and he had tons of experience. And he was like, Emily, there's going to be a mistake. And you know what? There's going to be another issue coming. And I was like, okay, like I have to just at some point ship it and be okay with it.
Yeah. I guess that is one maybe advantage to a podcast. It's like you get the however long of interview you have with the person, and then it's over. You might need to edit something here or edit something there. But oh my gosh, if these were like written, I'd probably drive myself insane.
Yeah. It could be overwhelming for sure.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, so we're just being lazy. But yeah, I think early on though too, we understood that if we developed over time a pattern of acting and kind of we just developed a brand that we were comfortable with, that projected the kind of guys we want to be, then, as those episodes maybe come along every now and then that you're not so proud of, it just washes in because people know what you're all about. And I'm sure you must have figured that out over the years if you had somebody on that had something in your magazine where you weren't maybe nuts about it or whatever. You just, people are loyal. And if someone's that flaky, then maybe they need a different magazine anyway. But so in terms of, so you said the magazine is becoming extinct. Are you guys moving to print, like an online type of version? Or is that what you mean, like print only? Or
yeah, I think print.
Together?
I think print. Just the printing costs and shipping costs have just tripled in the time that we've been doing this, and there's only so much that the market will bear those increases. but I mean, we will still always print because I mean, I look at a screen all day long and I cannot stand to read on a screen. So I've got to hold it in my hand and, you know, carry it to the barn or sit down on the couch or wherever. Like I have to get away from my computer at some point during the day. But, I mean, I think the things that we're doing with video are hopefully going to be of interest to a more younger audience and maybe who aren't as reading oriented. I mean, I think also like the it bypasses the language barrier. So we've had, you know, quite a few international subscribers to our streaming version of the Gazette, which now that we have that online available to everybody, I think that opens up a broader audience for us too.
I see. Yeah, I think having something in hand you can read, well, I don't think that'll go away for a while at least. I like to listen to audiobooks, and I find that when I listen to a good audiobook, I'll go purchase the paper book and put it on my shelf. And I haven't I haven't actually read any of those paper books, but I like having them because I can like
Yeah.
I'll listen to audiobooks and I'll hear stuff and I'm like, "Oh, I got to remember that." And I'll put it in my phone as a note, but it makes me want to own the book, and then I can
Mm-hmm.
read it and find that spot and put a little yellow sticky note in there. And something about having it in paper, it's there. And it's probably not a bad idea too if the internet ever crashes or something like that, then you're going to be kind of out, or we get a big solar flare and your phone is corrupted, then you're not going to have all your great audiobooks or your magazines. So having that bookshelf might be your best friend. So is
Yeah, for sure.
in terms of like the Eclectic Horseman vision or goal, has that kind of evolved quite a bit, or do you feel like your mission is still kind of the same from when you started out?
I would say both, which I know is sort of like a smart alecky way to answer that. But I would say that the underlying goal, like the thing that guides me, which, you know, like horses really helped me in my life. And so for me, my motivation is to do something to try and educate people, to make people aware of what the horse has to offer. So like that fundamental part has not changed. Like I would say my mission statement hasn't changed. And I would say that over time, Eclectic has just evolved. I would say maybe a little bit bigger tent, bigger umbrella as far as like expanding out from the core of folks that we started with and sort of, you know, pushing those edges a little bit as younger people come on the scene that have a lot to offer and trying to include them. I feel like it's sort of, I would say, like a university model in that, like, I don't feel like my job is to promote our sources. Like, we're not advertising vehicle for them. Like, we are a conduit for passing along information from them to an audience. So I feel like that hasn't changed. And as long as I keep that focus, then I feel like I can keep like the purity of what we're doing. It's not about promoting the professors if you look at it from that model, but it's about like having their information shared to a broader audience. And I would say the video work that we've done with the Horseman's Gazette has been an extension of that. I mean, we started with video. We started by doing videos for other people, and then we sort of said, hey, well, this would be a really great companion to the print work that we're doing. And then I sort of lost what your question was, and I got distracted. So,
No, that's you talked about it. I was
Okay.
curious because you remember when we were talking, I think before the podcast even started, we were just comparing notes a little bit between our little venture here and what you've been doing for years, but about it seems like a great idea. You're looking at this thing, like doing a magazine or doing a podcast, but there's a lot of stuff you don't know until you start doing it. And then even as you do it, it's like a continual progression in this education as you go along. So not only does that inform you about a lot of things, but from the outset, you can have like great intentions, or you can have certain goals or kind of wishes for what your work will do. And then as you go along, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I actually want to do this, or maybe we should point ourselves in that direction. So I was just curious, in terms of, you've been talking about kind of how you do present the magazine and how you try to pass along that information. If that, if that goal, if you could see that even in the future, like changing it all to try to fit the way people consume media, like, because you were talking about videos and things like that, or if you would just continue, if your goal is to present this information and just help be a conduit, and then do you think you will continue to take your magazine and whatever is the most popular way at the time to get information out there, you'll keep evolving in those different avenues, but you'll stay true to that goal of being a conduit for all these people's experience and information that they teach and pass on?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's my plan. I feel like, I mean, 20 however many years in, and I'm still learning how to do my job better, and thinking about, structuring each issue with more intention, and sort of thinking about different learning modalities and how those evolve over the course of, I mean, like when you start writing, you're sort of, looking for information that's like just directly from a teacher. Tell me how to do this thing, and then I'll do it, and then I'll learn it. And then as you start to build your own base of knowledge, you're starting to evaluate, okay, well, maybe in this situation, this way of doing it is more fitting. And you're constantly broadening that well that you're drawing from. Hopefully you're not stuck in that same, like, I can't think of a good analogy, but, and so I feel like the magazine is the same way. So as my learning, of horsemanship evolves, then I can also like think about that in how I structure the content and the articles, and who I get to write what kind of article, because it's just endless how you can revisit different ideas. So people are like, do you ever run out of ideas? And I'm like, no, I just feel like I run out of space, and I have to like, okay, push it to the next issue. Okay, thankfully there's another issue. And I mean, that's been the story of my life, has just been, okay, this one's good, it's out the door, do a better job next time, and try and get more in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could have either. You could have a kind of a fear of running out of ideas, or you could have endless ideas, but have a little bit of angst because you have a pushback to want to kind of evolve with the times. And you're like, no, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And it sounds like you've got a pretty healthy approach to that.
I'm
and
fortunate
it probably helps
that
you. Oh, sorry. I think we have a little overlay there.
Oh, I was just going to say, fortunately, I don't have to just do one or the other. So like we have the magazine, the print magazine, we have the video work that we do with the Gazette, and then I, started to do some interviews on YouTube. So it's like I can sort of add to the ways in which we're reaching new people and keeping the delivery of information fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was kind of my question. I was wondering just mostly if you felt any pressure towards that. I think it's weird. Like Joe and I are both real young guys, and at the rate that things are progressing, and I'm not like trying to sound like a doomsdayer or anything, but I mean, things are progressing pretty quick. Like I was telling you, this program we used has evolved immensely in 6 months. And I think it's that the AI, it's gotten way better, the way it edits this thing. And so there is kind of a drive. Like sometimes I think, gosh, if I could have been born in the 30s or 40s, at least if I had a good idea, this week, it'd still be good next week. And sometimes it feels like you have a good idea, and then you wake up tomorrow and like a dozen other people are already doing it, and it's already getting old, and you're like, shoot, that was my whole idea. And there's like a whole world connected on the World Wide Web, just constantly thinking of new stuff. And I don't really walk around every day thinking that, but I think there's a tendency, and I see it in people even younger than me, that they're like, maybe I'll miss out if I don't get going right now. I think we are somewhat protected from that mentality just because of the nature of this community, the horsemanship world. It's not, well, for one, it's not like we're all racing towards the future anyway. And there's a lot of value. People value each other. They value these relationships. If they've been working with someone for years, they're going to keep doing that. But I think there is, and it sounds like you don't feel it. And I think that's terrific. I just think some younger people, it's easy to feel this pull, no matter what you do. You have this pull to like want to keep up because things are evolving so quickly. And even if like the nature of your venture or the thing you're trying to do is like very wholesome, and it's not about like becoming successful or selling the most copies or having the most listens, like you still kind of want to keep up. You don't want to get forgotten. And then at the rate of progress, like I said, every day, it seems like maybe the idea you had yesterday isn't so good today. It doesn't have a 10-year lifespan. It's got like maybe a week-long lifespan. And so that's probably a really great thing about the way you set out to do this in the first place, and the genre that you're in, is that you got these like loyal clinicians that probably love being in your magazine, got great loyal customers buying your magazine. I mean, the Eclectic Horseman Magazine could probably be one of the last magazines on earth still being printed, right? When everyone else goes to some digital thing, that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me sad. I mean, I inherently value competition. And so like, that's the part too, that I think, when there are other people like doing the same thing that you're doing, like, then you get to watch them and go, or read them and say, okay, well, that's how you did that, but I want to handle it a little bit differently. Or, hey, that was a really, interesting way you did that layout. I'm going to liberate that idea and modify it to fit me. And I think instead of feeling like I feel like that's healthy, where there's lots of different voices and lots of different options for people. So, I mean, I think like, yeah, the podcast world, there's a lot of them, but it's also super exciting because you can be like, well, hey, I like how that person did that one thing. I'm gonna tweak that for my own style, or liberate the idea and make it free on my platform. So, but yeah, I mean, I hope we're not the last. That would make me really sad. But
no, yeah, I'm sure you won't. But yeah, that I hadn't thought of it like that. I mean, I've thought of competition being healthy, but I hadn't thought of it like that, where if you're in a market like a magazine, and if they're being, do you know the statistics on like just magazines, and for instance like the horse industry, like how many there were, I don't know, 20 years ago versus today?
Just anecdotally from visiting with some of my freelancers. I mean, I have freelancers that made a living, like a good living, writing for Equus and Horse and Rider, Western Horseman, Dressage Today, Dressage and CT. I mean, like you can just sit down and then all the breed magazines and all the event specific magazines. Like there was a ton of variety out there. And I mean, not that it was fitting for what I wanted to do, but there was at least, people were reading and people were interested. I don't have any hard statistics, but just from talking to them, and now, they're not making their living doing that kind of writing anymore.
Wow. Have many magazines moved to an online platform where people are getting like an email or just going on a website? I'm really not in that realm. Like I read a lot of paper magazines, but I've never done the online like magazine thing.
There are some that have gone that way. And then, just sort of the nature of like lots of businesses is they've consolidated and been bought by larger corporations. And so this magazine has been folded into that magazine, has been folded into this magazine and sold to this publishing company that has, lifestyle magazines and horse, so there's been a lot of that in the last, 15 years. So it's, and thankfully I do have a really incredible subscriber base and a really loyal niche. And so I can't spend time thinking about it because I have too much else to do every day. So I just do my work and do the best job I can do. And that's all I have control over is the work that I'm doing every day.
That's a healthy perspective. Yeah. Control what you can control.
Because otherwise it's just too nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
I can imagine.
At what point in your history did you start branching out from printed magazines? When did you start doing videos?
So in 2005, Martin Black approached us to do some videos, instructional videos for him. He asked if that was something we could do. And like everything else that we've done, it was yeah, sure. We don't know anything about it, but sure, we can do that. So, but I did not have confidence in doing the film work myself. I thought I can surely edit footage. I can teach myself the software. I can figure that out. And so we hired a professional videographer to come and film his clinic down here just south of us. And it was a nightmare, to be really blunt. The footage, I'm sure that the fellow was really talented in filming what he was used to filming, but he was not a horse person at all. So Martin would be talking about, the look on the horse's face, and he'd be zoomed in on a concho with the mane blowing by it. And it was oh, this is going to be tough. So we edited it and we got a good product out of it. That was his first colt starting philosophy DVD. And then after that, I went and bought a camera and I just taught myself how to use it. And I think we did 14 DVDs for Martin, all of Martin's DVDs. We filmed those and edited those. We did a couple for Richard Caldwell, a couple for John Ensign. I did some for Margaret Dorrance with some vintage footage that she had of Tom, and I did a couple for Peter Campbell. Anyway, so that was an incredible learning experience, and sort of just jump in and learn how to do it. And then right after I had my daughter, which is really a great time to think about traveling on the road a lot, we decided to do the Horseman's Gazette. So she was 9 months old when we set out to start filming and commit to making 4 DVDs a year. And so she's a total road warrior. In the very beginning, Steve and Sydney and I went together in the truck, and then as Sydney got older and Steve stays home, and Sydney and I go together. She's the best traveling companion that I've got. And so so we've been doing the Gazette since 2009, and we're on issue 55 right now. So that's been an incredible, stockpile of content, which now I've digitized and uploaded to be streaming. So that's a really cool library for people to access.
Gotcha. So it was really more where the opportunity was. That's kind of what drove you.
Yeah. I guess I've just never, if somebody asks you if you want to do a job, say yes and then figure out how to do it after you've got the job, kind of thing. I can learn software, and I had a ton of experience with photography, which really, the work that I do is not Hollywood quality, but I know how to capture something and have it be educational. And that's the people that we've done work for and the work that I do for us. Like that's the focus is getting the story across.
Hey there, On the Move listener. Do you enjoy listening to this podcast? If you've made it this far in the episode, I assume you do. But you never know. I could just be talking to someone's house cat at this point. But if you are there and you like the podcast, the best thing you can do to help support our journey to keep this thing going is to find us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, leave a rating, leave a review, get on social media, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube. The more we can grow this, the easier it's going to become for us to put out episodes every week and get awesome guests so we can learn and stay on the move just like you. Thanks. Gotcha. Yeah, I do have to say, the thing when I first saw an Eclectic Horseman magazine, the thing that struck me the most was the photography work. And I don't know if that's all you or a collection of people. But like even that issue that's behind you, like the Ray Hunt issue there, that it's like all the photos you use, there's such an iconic style to them. So that was the thing, even more so than the articles, that drew me to the magazine. And honestly, like, it's cool to just have those like paper photos in your hand to look through. And then obviously the articles are great as well. But that was the thing that drew me. I was like, man, like this is like content I enjoy and a very unique style of photography. I don't know what it is. Like, you know, we've had Nicole Pollo on here, and like you can tell when she has, like, that's a Nicole photo, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, I'm sure it's a collection, but especially the covers of Eclectic Horseman, if it didn't have the logo, I could look at a photo and be like, that could be an Eclectic Horseman photo.
Cool.
Or an Eclectic Horseman cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it's very unique. So I think
Cool.
you've done a good job with that.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I have a lovely pool of really talented photographers that I go to, you know, and Nicole is one of them, and like Melanie Elzinga, she takes the most incredible photos, and Mary Hyde Williams, I'm brain dead. Forgive me, Mary. And, you know, like having a really great group of folks who are out there in the world. I mean, I'm one person, I can't be everywhere. And thankfully, they've been really generous with their imagery.
Yeah. Well, it also takes someone to, you know, you're the editor, so it's got to pass through you, right? So yeah, you've done a good job selecting people, but then you've also did a good job kind of curating all this content. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you. Thanks.
So the process of filming those first instructional DVDs for the Gazette, how did that kind of go? How much input did they have with you for the very first ones? Like whoever you did the first, you said it was it Martin Black? That's kind of what kicked off the Gazette.
So we did videos for Martin. Like he hired us to film and produce his videos. So in that relationship, we were sort of contract workers providing a service. And so that in that way, like Martin had an idea of what he wanted to do. And then we would collaborate to get that done. And each of the folks that we've done things with have been a little different. I mean, like, Martin's roping videos, we did, like we had 2 cameras set up and like tons of footage. So like we'd get, shots of the header and the heeler from different angles and splicing it together and making the edits. And I mean, he came and sat next to me at the computer and we worked together to put together those projects. And then the Gazette, that's me doing the work, and sort of running, you know, but for the most part, I talk to the sources that I'm filming with, and I say, hey, what do you got going on? Do you have a project? Do you have a horse in that has something interesting going on? Or what are you seeing in clinics when you teach that folks need to hear about? And for the most part, I feel like they're the ones that are out doing the work, and they are the ones that sort of have their finger on the pulse of what people need help with. Sometimes I'll have an idea and say, hey, what about this? But for the most part, I don't plan that so much. It's usually real organic. Sometimes I'll even show up to film something, and like we had the first time I went to film with Trevor Carter, and his horse hadn't been in an indoor arena, and it was up in Boulder. It was super windy, and the horse was pretty spooky. And instead of just saying, hey, let's let your horse get settled before we do the work that we came here to do, we filmed him getting the horse comfortable for the rest of the day. And that was one of the best segments that we'd done, because it was real and in the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I imagine your experience in horsemanship already probably helped a lot. I mean, I'm sure that's why they picked you to do that, or approach you to do that with them. But yeah, I can imagine if those guys are wanting you to make an instructional video for them, or like your Gazette. I'm still not sure. Is the Gazette, so that's different than these instructional videos, but is the Gazette sort of like a video presentation of what you do with the magazine? Or could you describe the Gazette? Because I haven't seen any of those.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's a quarterly video series, and each issue, now I just call them issues because they're either in DVD format or streaming. But each issue has, I don't know, 5-6 stories in it with different resources. And so yeah, my original idea was to have a little bit like 60 minutes, where you have an hour and you have different segments. But I couldn't keep it to 60 minutes because I couldn't make it that short. So, but there's like 5 or 6 stories in each one, and a lot of overlap between the folks that we have in the magazine, but not all the same. I like to think that they complement each other. Just people have different learning modalities, and just some concepts are better taught in video than they are in print. So I feel like I need all the help I can get to learn things. And so like any format that I can provide information in is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you said you set out to do them a little bit shorter, and then you found you could do them shorter than 60 minutes. I think we found that with doing these. I think originally we were going to do about an hour, and then we found, frankly, I think we're finding out that about an hour and a half where we cut off, that's kind of the sweet spot. That's where you're like, all right, now we can rock and roll. It's not hard to keep going after that. It's something loosens up. However, I'm sure it's much different filming those videos, because then, like you said, anything can happen. You can kind of roll with the punches, come up with a little bit of a new plan, and then you can always go back and edit and make it the length you want. So it's not like you're rolling up. It would be weird to probably shoot that, like show up for the exact thing you're going to video, and then unless the guy's just superhuman, they're going to feel under pressure to do exactly what you're there to film, like on point, right?
Yeah. Well, and I really try and not edit the video. Like we try and leave everything in real time, because if you're learning how to do something with horses, like you're studying, okay, the horse, the blinking is starting, they're starting to let down, they're looking at their breathing, or, like you're watching for those signals and those changes. And if you think about those old instructional videos where they'd have the horse in the round pen and it was, fresh, and then they'd cut and the horse would be wrung out from head to toe sweating. And you're like, okay, what happened in that edit? What happened there in that missing piece? So I try and keep it all in there.
Yeah, I think they're still making some of those if you go to the right platform.
Yeah.
All right. So something I really want to ask you about is your childhood, because you mentioned that you started a horse quite early on in life with Buck Brannaman. Were you raised in a ranching household or a horse household?
So, my mom had a horse that she raised. She had his mother, and she raised him from a foal. And she had the most amazing relationship with this horse and would ride him. We lived in California, and she had him in Griffith Park and rode him all through the hills, and had him in the Sierras, and would, like this storybook thing, like ride for 8 hours a day and, hop off of him and lay down and take a nap and then sit up and whistle, and he'd come running. And so, so horses were there, but it was it was my mom and her horse. And he was not a kid's horse. And so I didn't, we'd get on him a little bit, but it wasn't really a thing for us. And then we moved to Colorado when I was like 11, and we ended up moving right across the street from a boarding facility. And it didn't take me very long to finagle cleaning stalls for half leases on horses. And so that was pretty much my whole focus in life, was to get home from school, clean stalls, and ride. And there was a dressage instructor there. And so that was what I started riding, and was totally enamored with the history. I took German in high school, which is, not super practical, but I was really obsessed with that. And I learned how to clean stalls from Ursula, and she taught me to clean the stalls so that I could sleep in it, had to be that clean. And so that was a really incredible time to get to have that barn experience, and had friends that rode there, and it was great. And then that instructor moved to New York, just to sort of, that was where she needed to go to do what she needed to do with her dressage career. And I was a working student for another dressage trainer at another barn. And then also at the same time, Mindy Bauer moved in to that barn that was right across the street from where I lived. And so she was training horses out of there, starting a lot of really tough problem horses, and just a huge assortment. And it was something that was totally different than what I had seen before. And she wasn't there very long. I think I was in 8th grade. And one day at the end of the day, she said, "Hey, do you want to start one of my colts in a Buck Brannaman clinic?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's a Buck Brannaman clinic?" I had no idea, but I was like, "Yeah, I want to do it." So, and that was just a huge experience for me. And the colt that I had was one that she had raised, and he was a little bit late to get started. He'd had an injury, and so he was a little bit older, but he was just the coolest horse. It was the best experience I could have ever had. And, he took care of me. He let me learn. It was just super positive. And so I was totally hooked. But I still sort of had I had my dressage horse that I was half leasing, and then Curly that I'd started at the Buck Clinic and was taking to horsemanship clinics. And I still really had this sort of split in my head about one thing and the other thing. And then Curly got hurt, or I was signed up for a clinic and I couldn't take him. And so Mindy was like, "Well, take Airborne, the other horse that you're riding." And I'm like, "But he's a dressage horse." And she's like, "It's all the same thing." So that was, again, a huge memory for me. And I was still working as a working student in the dressage barn, and I got to ride some really incredible horses, super talented, really well trained. But I could remember one memory really strong was, so I would get the horses ready and get on and warm them up for the trainer, and then get a lesson at the end of the day. And I was riding this thoroughbred, and, he was off the track. He had no idea what I was asking him. And I was being told to, push him into a frame, and I just that feeling of he has no clue of what I'm trying to do. And this is not fair, compared to Curly, where like, okay, what I'm doing there, like he understands what's being asked of him, and that is fair to him as a horse. So, so that was sort of when I sort of said, okay, I'm doing this, and sort of left the dressage part behind. Yeah.
That's a pretty good story. Yeah, that's funny when you said that was a memorable moment. Did you mean that was memorable when Mindy said, just take the dressage horse, it's all the same? Was that kind of an aha moment, or had you had it before that?
Oh no. I mean, I can remember being like, but I can't take him to the clinic. He doesn't know the things that you do at the clinic. He doesn't know those things. And I mean, yeah, I was like probably 15, so like, it was so compartmentalized in my brain. Like, this is the horse that I take to the clinics and I do the clinic things. And this is the horse that I take to the dressage lessons and I do the dressage things. And I hadn't really made that leap yet to think it's just about all horses.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting how many people can have that hold up. I definitely feel like I see it quite a bit on the East Coast, or, like kind of like you were describing, they'll compartmentalize things until they get, maybe it's the right horse that it isn't fitting the mold of what they're maybe trying to do, but then they've been exposed to all these ideas that like, oh, this is kind of how you have all these building blocks you can use. And well, obviously you kind of sorted it out, but it's not an uncommon problem for people to have. And it's pretty cool when people do come to that realization, because I mean, this is probably for most of the people listening, it's not new information, but it's like riding horses for the public. There's just so many hang-ups, especially on the East Coast, it seems like, about your gear, like just wearing a cowboy hat. And then it's like, you could just put other tack on him and like do all this same stuff. But yeah, that can be, especially early in someone's horse career, that can be quite a holdup for people. So, and obviously you kind of got through it and it wasn't a big deal, but I always find that so funny, how much of a holdup that can be.
Yeah. Well, we classify people by the outfits that they wear, the uniforms that they wear. And so I think it is sort of natural for people to look at somebody's quote unquote costume and make a judgment about who they are as a person or what they do with their horse. And yeah, it takes time to see beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard that Ray Hunt had a quote or a little story where he said his dream one day would be to be out riding, and some little kid would come riding over the hills, and his little pony would start acting up a little, and he'd reach down and he'd bend him with feel and get his hindquarters engaged a little and get stopped, and he would ride up there and say, "Hey, little fella, who taught you how to do that?" And the kid would say, "Do what? This is what everybody does." It would just be something bred in from a young age. So people don't have to have this moment where they're like, oh, any horse thinks the same, or any horse is a horse. But that they would just learn that first and then find a discipline later. Like we had our friend Joel Connor on here several episodes back, and he was talking about his boys and how they ride with him some, and just reflecting on how cool it was that he could get them started at riding, and he's trying to think about ways to just get them comfortable and just be comfortable going on a horse. Just thinking about that, just going, and not like being indoctrinated in what kind of clothes to wear. And I'm sure a lot of great horsemen out there do that with their kids. But what an advantage, how cool would that be? So that way you don't have to. I think horse lovers just love horses. That's kind of hard to pinpoint when you first liked a horse. People ask you all the time. People ask me, and I'm like, I don't know. I've always liked horses. But But that aha moment, that you that you definitely remember. And if you had the opportunity, and I know some people who I think have definitely had the opportunity to kind of feel that or just learn that as a way of life early on, and boy, what a benefit to them because they've been able to apply it from such an early age, and it's really helped them to go on and be extremely successful at how they, what they accomplish on the back of a horse. But that's such a cool little story, though, about Ray, that he had that thought. And I know we don't live in a perfect world, but that is kind of a cool dream. And in a way, I'm sure that's, like your magazine is only things like your magazine or people keeping on doing clinics and riding horses for people and telling their clients about horsemanship. And, not like everyone should go out there and make a big sign, maybe right off the bat, but for sure, just talking about it and sharing ideas and stuff. And I mean, if it's ever going to get there, that's probably how it's going to happen, right? Is people sharing ideas and just having that mentality of, giving and sharing what they know and encouraging other people to keep trying.
Yeah, where horsemanship isn't, horsemanship isn't separate from everything else that we do. It's part of all the disciplines are based fundamentally on good horsemanship principles. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. And that seems to be a general direction things are going in. And like we were talking about the internet and how things are changing because of technology and the internet, but I think that actually is one pro, is that people can see videos of other people riding and getting things done and kind of compare that against what they're doing and think, hey, that might be a better way. And eventually that would be so cool to see all the disciplines have kind of have a very unique and distinct way of doing their own discipline, but all be drawing from that foundation of what Ray and Tom and those guys tried to present. And obviously the masters from long ago, and there's always been good horsemen, but this is really a good time for information sharing, thanks to the internet and email and good postal system.
Yep. Yeah.
Here's a question I have for you, Emily, because we're talking about how available all of this is. And, I assume what we're talking about, you're still riding and kind of have personal horses today and everything. Given the nature of your job, I almost feel like obviously you have a huge advantage because you get to go to a lot of clinics and you get to talk to a lot of people and hear all these ideas. But sometimes I know for me personally, when I'm working with horses or trying to improve myself, sometimes I have times where I'm thirsting for information and I'm I got to figure this out. I got to watch this. I got to rewind this however many times. I got to read this article, yada, yada, yada. And then there's other times where it's okay, now I need to put myself in a hole in the ground and just do this over and over and over and not try to bring more information into the situation, just focus. And maybe develop my feel or develop my timing, or it's something more internal than actually reaching out to a teacher. And I feel like I kind of, as I grow, it's just cycles of that, right? So it's get all this new information, process it, try to apply it, and then maybe when you're comfortable for it, when you're comfortable with it, you go in and then you feel oh, okay, now I need this piece, and then you go and revisit the information, continuously do that. But if I had a job where I was running a magazine and I was listening to all these clinicians all the time, I feel like it might almost be like drinking through a fire hose, and it's oh my gosh, I can't possibly process all of this, and I'm not going to be able to interact with the horse without thinking about, well, so-and-so said this and so-and-so said this and da-da-da-da. And maybe I'm just imagining that because I've never done your job. But I know there have been times, especially when I first started out and I was like so gung ho to just stay up all night watching DVDs or whatever it was, um, that looking back now, I was like, I just absorbed way too much information and there's no way I'm going to be able to apply this in any real capacity. So has that ever happened to you just in your personal working with horses, because you're like, well, I just, got off the road and went to half a dozen clinics, and like, there's no way I'm going to be able to interact with a horse without overanalyzing everything.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, maybe because I am older than you guys, like I feel like I still have the passion and the wanting to improve, but I don't feel maybe like the same sort of like tension about like I gotta get the like now it's like it's going to happen in the time that it happens, and I know my limitations. Like I should be the best horse person around, right? Because I listen to all this information and I'm watching these people all the time, but I'm still just a human and I still can only like learn at the rate like everybody else learns, even though I do have all this input. So I would say like working with Tom Curtin on the photo articles, a theme that keeps coming up again and doing those is like, how does your horse feel when he's around you? And I feel like that, like like the more that I know, the more like pared down I feel like things get, where there's all these things to do, but the most important thing is how does my horse feel when he's around me before I try and do any of those things. So trying to keep that in perspective and not just thinking about the things that I'm trying to get done, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does 100%, because one, I agree with you that maybe having a little more perspective after you've done this a while. Tension's a good word. You kind of start to lose that tension about maybe feeling like you have to put yourself on a timeline or anything like that. But yeah, like you said, you can only focus on so much stuff at any point, and that having a key principle to go back to, it is what can kind of keep you grounded, as opposed to floating around to all these different concepts and worrying about this or worry about that. So that to me makes a lot of sense, where you can just, if you ever do feel like you said, if you're getting lost, you just go back to that, yes or no, and if the answer is no, then you can reevaluate. If the answer is yes, well, they can't all be going to hell in a handbasket, right?
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, but no, I did have that thought, especially as we were talking, but even before today, when I knew we were going to get you on the podcast, I was like, I just can't imagine being, like you said, being the conduit for all that, and then you try to, maybe. Well, let me ask you this too: do you ever like get worn out? Like you're like, oh, you don't want to, maybe not don't want to be around your horse, but don't want to try to get too horsemanshipy with your horse today? Or is it different because you're like at a desk and you're just trying to get outside and be around the horses and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I do all my own chores, and so like I feed the horses and I clean the corral and I do belly scratches, like that to me, like just like that part of my day keeps me sane, and like I get to be around them just as who they are. So like we have a relationship besides just the riding part, and so I mean, yeah, there's there's times when, I've been hurt, or the horse has been hurt, or the weather's awful. Like, so I guess, like, there's more diversity to the relationship besides just the riding, so that then when you go to ride and work on things, you have that connection that's already there. I guess that sort of diminishes that sort of pressure. And also, I'm just not competitive, so like, I don't feel like I have to. I mean, maybe a different time in my life, I felt like I needed to, I got to get my horse in the bridle, and I have to accomplish these certain things, and I have to, be this kind of horse person, and sort of check these things off my list. And then now I just don't feel that way. I just feel like I want to ride whatever horse I have and do the best I can, and have a good time together, and improve each time I ride. But I don't feel that sort of pressure to perform, and that's nice too. But I'm not, I'm just riding for myself anyway. So I'm not making a living doing it. I'm not trying to attract clients by the work that I do. I'm just purely getting to enjoy my time with a horse.
Yeah, which is awesome. That's that. I really enjoy what I do now, but when horses weren't a part of my income, I really enjoyed kind of the purity of that relationship as well. So I completely understand what you mean there.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of I love this quote that Buck said on his episode with us. He said, I don't care much what other people think, because it's none of my damn business anyway. And I think that's not saying you don't care about what you don't care about what you think about what you're doing. You obviously have to care. You have to care, but you're not so worried about, like you said, you're not worried that everyone's like, oh, does she have her horse in the bridle yet? But you kind of settle in to the journey, and then people will see who you are over time, whether that matters to you or not. But the main thing is that you settle in, and you kind of go at your pace. Yeah, I was kind of wondering things along the lines of what Joe just asked you about, because I was thinking about, your day is busy enough, and you've got all these things going on, and then it's got to be interesting for you being around all that information and in this niche, this really cool world. Do you think that by running the magazine, all the time that you put into it, that has kind of held you back from maybe doing more with horses or getting better with your horse faster? Or do you think it's been a benefit to your horsemanship personally?
Well, I just can't even imagine doing anything else to make a living. So, like, that's hard for me to answer, because I don't know what else I'd do if I wasn't doing this. So it's hard for me to, I worked a retail job one summer for about 2 months, and that's really been the only other work that I've done. So that's an interesting question to think about. I mean, I still I don't want to say they're separate, but it is, I am me doing my work, and then I am me going and riding. When you have your brain might tell your body to do something, and your body doesn't always comply with what you're thinking, like, okay, well, I can visualize, Buck setting up a perfect canter depart, and his horse is beautiful, and it's soft, and the timing is perfect. And just because I know what that looks like, and I know what I would like it to look like, it's not, I still have to learn how to do it. So, I mean, I don't know. I can answer that question. I think I would still ride. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. We've got this crazy delay. I think it's because your internet's so good and mine's so bad. But go right ahead.
Well, I mean, I think I would still ride if I wasn't doing this work. But I just don't know what other work I would want to do.
Fair enough. Do you get a chance to bring
That makes
horses
sense.
along with you in your travels?
I like to clinics around here. Like I'll take a horse and go ride, and then set up to do some filming or take some pictures and try and multitask like that. But um, like we just ran up to Buffalo Monday to Tuesday, so that was like silly 900 miles in 2 days to film 5 segments. It was crazy. And then I'm getting ready to do a loop in Idaho, Oregon, Utah, but I'll just rent a car, and just because it's so much driving, and I don't want to have to take my truck. So
Yeah. So, do you enjoy traveling, driving around,
yeah,
or is that something you just put up with that goes along with the work that you do?
no, I love it. I love to drive. So I mean, which is good. But
Yeah.
I love to travel. I like to go places, and yeah, I like to. I mean, I love being at home, but I also love to travel. So it's I guess it's good that I like both.
Yeah.
What does a typical work year or a typical work month, what does that look like for you? I'm sure it's seasonal, probably kind of like how clinics are a little seasonal, but are you on the road more? Are you at home editing? And also, are you the only full time person for Eclectic Horseman, or how does that work?
So my husband and I work together, and we're the only two employees, full time employees. And then I have freelancers that do freelance work, but I film all the video and do the articles that I do. I do those, and as far as a work schedule, um, I'm just working all the time. So I mean,
Yeah.
before. We moved my daughter to a different high school, and it's a bit of a haul. So we have to. So I've tried to do all my filming in the summer this year, so that when she has to be in school, there's not just one of us at home having to do that drive every day, because it's like 500 miles a week that we drive to take her to high school. So it's a pretty big commitment. So I this summer I've tried to get all my content and for a year for the Gazette, and I won't get everything done. I'll go out to California in October, um, and maybe in September, but just little trips. So yeah, I look at like clinics that are in my area to go get photos, and I get content that way, and then I just work with different sources if they're in my area for their travels, or like it's just really changeable, and I'm just working on trying to get ahead all the time, and ending up behind all the time. So
Oh, yeah. Well, like you said, you own your own business, so
yeah,
that's you know, you don't have to work a 9 to 5. You just get to work all the time.
yeah, I love the meme that was like, being self-employed means you get to pick which 80 hours you work a week. So that's about
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I can relate to that. I appreciate that 100%.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we'll head towards wrapping this thing up. It's been really fun. Thank you so much for doing this with us. And if anybody out there would like to sign up for Eclectic Horseman or follow you guys if you're on social platforms or any other kind of things you guys have going on, what's the best way for them to look you up?
And they can look on our website, eclectic-horseman.com, and we have a YouTube channel, and we have Facebook and Instagram. So you can find us in all those places.
Excellent.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys. This was fun. It was really fun.
Good. Well,
Oh, you
we
bet.
appreciate you coming on. Yeah, it's fun to get to. Obviously, all the guests we have on here, it's really fun to talk to them because we have something in common with them one way or another. But in a lot of ways, what we do here on the podcast, we really look up to something like Eclectic Horseman, where it's like media in the same niche, I guess would be the best way to put it. So it's cool to get to talk to uh, someone who is kind of proven at this point, right? Like I know you're probably not where you guys want to be, but it is a proven multi-decade business at this point, and you've kind of shown people like us that there's a market for it. It can be done. So it's pretty cool to get to talk to you and pick your brain a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, just keep going. Just keep, if you love it, you'll keep doing it, and time will go by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Great to see you again.
All right.
And we'll see you at some point, I'm sure. Take care.
All right, thanks.